A lot of people heard about you, and I think, and we're delighted to welcome you at our event, and thank you for joining again. So Jaan is a very prominent Estonian who is mostly famous for being a founding engineer of Kazaa and Skype, and also as an early investor in DeepMind, which in turn was famous for AlphaGo and AlphaChess. We have a lot of chess lovers here today. Jaan is now engaged in reducing existential risk to humanity from advanced technologies such as AI through a number of organizations that Jaan has either founded himself, such as the Center for the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge, as well as the Future of Life Institute at MIT, or through organizations he's supporting like the Future of Humanity Institute, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, etc. Jaan is also known to be an active investor in startups. We have come across some of Jaan's companies and his investment team. As I've discovered in my research, you have invested about 150 million over the last 10 years or so. But it is less known that Jaan also has 6 kids. Jaan, you are our personal hero. Also, Jaan has majored at Tartu University in physics, exploring time warps in space-time, which excites us quite as well. And Jaan is holding half of his net worth in crypto. So Jaan, it is a great pleasure to welcome such a person at our event, very prominent, and we're having a large live audience today, and recording would be available to about 200-300 people. We're a community of investors and founders, mostly from Eastern Europe. So experience and success of people like yourself is very important for us. Considering the time constraint, I would like to ask you to briefly share your views on several things. To kick off, why didn't you follow a more standard path of a VC investor, similar to your Skype founders or co-founders, but decided to focus on existential risk topic?
How should I put it? I mean, one way of looking at it is that I'm interested in impact, and I do think that the biggest impacts, mostly negative, but some of them positive, will come from what are known as externalities. Basically, the things that the market doesn't incentivize, or the prevention of things that the market doesn't incentivize. So, for example, there is like no point to insure against an existential risk. Like every insurer would be happy to sell you like insurance against existential risk, because it's guaranteed by definition that nobody will come with a claim later. So from that perspective, it's like if you're just in investing business, even more that, okay, if you're just in investing business, like your impact will necessarily be limited. Even more because you have like fiduciary duty. If you're a VC fund, fiduciary duty to your shareholders, to your LPs, which means that your hands are tied. You cannot go like, wait a minute, this technology is very dangerous. I shouldn't maximize my profits here, because you're kind of obliged to maximize the profits, even if it's a dangerous thing. So that's why I think it's kind of, if you really want to maximize impact, then you should, like philanthropy provides like a ultimately better channel, although like it has a lot of other issues that investing doesn't. So like I'm kind of been dividing my time between investing and philanthropy, but I totally expect most of my impact to come from philanthropy.
Interesting. And considering human evolution and our place in the universe, do you think existential risk is avoidable?
Yeah, I think so. Like avoidable, as in, I'm a physicist, right? As you mentioned. So unavoidable means that it's kind of determined by the laws of physics. So I don't think that that laws of physics say that humanity has to go extinct. There are just like a lot of dangers out there, especially this century. But I guess one of the big reasons, like if I thought it was unavoidable, I wouldn't deal with it. I would just do something else with my time.
A lot of us do have children, and you mentioned several times in your interviews that you, depending on whether people have children or are programmers, you ask them different question or you approach differently. But a lot of us do have children, and a lot of us are programming computers. So we understand the risk, existential risk, and the risk of AI. But from your research and from the work you're doing, how do you see it? Why and when technology could turn hostile against humans?
Yeah, I mean, like, the technology doesn't turn hostile. Also, like, the concern really isn't hostile AI. When we're talking about AI, the concern is indifferent AI and indifferent and competent AI. Like, in some sense, like, humans are indifferent and competent when it comes to a lot of other species, right? The reason why we have driven them extinct isn't not so much that we kind of hate them, like, although we do hate some species like mosquitoes, but vast majority of species that we had driven extinct is just like we didn't care enough about them. So like, that is the same problem that if we are going to delegate decisions about the environment to machines, like, it's likely that the environment will start changing really quickly, which will drive us quickly extinct. So yeah, the concern isn't hostile but indifferent AIs, and also like there's like the usual risk of misuse. So like, if you think about it, like with nuclear weapons, there used to be like a 10-year period last century during which nuclear weapons were kind of genuine existential risk, because that was the period during which we didn't know whether the planet would survive the first nuclear detonation or not. Once we learned that it will survive, then it became clear that the main risk from nuclear weapons is misuse. And I think we have like many kind of technological risks have the same kind of profile. It's either kind of dangerous in itself because it creates a precedent that we might not survive, or it's dangerous because like somebody might misuse it.
And do you feel, obviously COVID was a big catastrophe for the humanity. In your interactions, you're talking to a lot of people, governments, companies, who are in the end the main sort of points of thought how to work with AI. Do you feel that awareness of people has changed somewhat because of COVID?
I mean, awareness of people, I mean, I've been working on this topic for like 12 years now, and definitely there is like a way easier to talk about these potential dangers than it was like 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So when it comes to COVID, I think it's too early to tell like if like what kind of impact COVID will have to this discourse. My hope is that like I've been calling COVID minimum viable global catastrophe, because it is definitely global, it is definitely catastrophic, but it's like could be like way worse. Like usual, like a median global catastrophe is much worse. And in some ways we kind of like started to run out of supply of people who still remember the last global catastrophe, which was the World War II. And now we have like entire planet worth of people who basically have like living memory of what it means to experience a global catastrophe. So I think like that might be a very useful resource to have. But like it's kind of early to tell like how it will actually play out and help.
Interesting. Another question I was thinking about, considering you've been doing research for such a long period of time, and obviously we're a group of more sort of generalists. We are less aware and less thinking on a daily basis about the risks. But what are the practical ways of utilizing, all of this work that you have been conducting, funding, to make sure the humanity is protected? Is it by working through technology companies who started doing AI ethic, committees and starting to adopt the policies, or is it through government regulation? And we know, where usually that leads. But what are the practical? Maybe if you could give some examples, would be interesting.
Yeah, I think like the things that are useful to do kind of change over time, and I think right now we're still like in some sense early phase where it's kind of suboptimal to to have governments to draft actual constraints. Although I think we're starting to get into that phase, and there are already some ideas like what governments could start be doing, or at least preparing to do. So indeed, at this point, I think it's more helpful to do, and that's what I've been doing, just like kind of fly around, talk to people that I think should be aware, like what the problems are. So I've been joking that I've been investing in AI companies in order to hang around in their kitchens and talk about AI risk. So yeah, and also trying to kind of like connect people who are concerned about AI and or working on AI safety and people who are working on AI capabilities. I think, in fact, like the most important thing that the Future of Life has been doing is a conference every 2 years. Unfortunately, this year it was cancelled because of obvious reasons. But like before that, we had like three conferences where we basically put together people from AI safety community and AI capabilities community to just lock them at a resort in Puerto Rico for a weekend.
Quite prominent after Elon Musk, I think, contributed significant amount of capital there. Was it?
Yeah, so Elon Musk is our biggest supporter at Future of Life Institute, and he also has been part of the conference 2 times out of 3. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the kitchens, and we obviously we're an investor, so we support companies, and these days it's sort of fashionable that every other company is about AI and machine learning. So people are. But when do you think at like what point of company development, from your experience, should we be starting to think about AI ethics policies or things like that?
I mean, it really depends on like what the sort of core DNA of the company and the product is. Like if it's sort of like, I mean, almost all AI companies are about implementation of an AI or deployment of an existing technique. So there it's in some ways, like usually it's like much safer to have AI companies that are using AI that basically has existed for several years and now is being just trained for some particular purpose, especially if that purpose does not involve manipulating humans. I think that's like really annoying. Or like, how should I put it? Like, I'm kind of annoyed with the economy that it incentivizes companies to take AIs in order to implicitly or explicitly manipulate humans. That's like dangerous for many reasons, and it's kind of disgusting, if you ask me. But like if you're like an AI company that just like applies AI to some I don't know, healthcare or something like that, then it's like I think there isn't like a lot of untraditional problems. I mean, technology companies always have some kind of ethical issues, so like you should be aware of the usual stuff. But when you're the more you kind of go towards kind of open-ended research and stuff like that, then I think it's really important to kind of bake some kind of risk and safety approaches to the kind of initial culture, because once the company starts getting really big, then it's really hard to introduce this. In fact, I claim that is like really big difference between OpenAI, DeepMind, and Google Brain. Google Brain didn't have the safety culture from the beginning, and from what I hear, it's very hard to introduce that now. Whereas DeepMind and OpenAI both had safety culture from the beginning.
They seem in Google, they just let go recently a person, and it's not a scandal, but there is a lot of noise about AI ethics at Google right now, and there is a lot of scrutiny there attracting.
Yeah, I mean, without kind of taking a kind of position, I hear like kind of conflicting things about like what. It seems that this particular case was a complex one. It wasn't like a black and white thing, but I think it is an indicative of a group that's not cohesive culturally when it comes to AI safety issues.
Interesting. Jan, we're a bit short on time. I would love to spend more time for our audience, but there are two more questions I sort of must ask considering our audience. One is about startups. So you keep investing, as we know, into technology companies, AI, non-AI, in particular from our region, which is quite important for us. So why do you keep doing that?
So the practical reason is that I hired like a good coworker who is like does most of the boring stuff. So it's like very easy for me to invest these days. So the more strategic reason is that I see like have like a three resources. I have time, money, and brand. And investing is way to trade my brand against money that I could then kind of turn around and use in my philanthropy. In fact, I'm right now in the middle of my biggest philanthropic round. So it's like if I didn't, if I didn't invest, then like I would kind of leave some value on the table by not utilizing my brand in order to support my philanthropy.
Okay, very practical. And then the other question, the second one, which I was wondering about, is crypto. So I read somewhere that you're holding like significant amount of your net worth, and a lot of investors. We have about 80 investors who are supporting our funds and have been investing together with us in our funds. So most of them are family offices or wealthy individuals, founders of some companies. So from that perspective, holding like half of your net worth in crypto might seem way too risky. So I'm curious, how you have decided on that. What has led you to holding so much in crypto?
Is it if it's half or 90% or 9%? It really depends on what day you ask, right? Because crypto goes like up and down 10x by a matter of course. Yeah, I mean, I got fascinated by crypto like in 2010 already, because it clearly seems something that is like totally novel in the world, and indeed, like I can try to balance I wonder how to kind of compress this thing. I mean, obviously, like, I'm very interested in kind of diversifying, but like it's I can realize whenever I diversify, I have to like buy things that I don't expect to do as well as crypto. So it's like there's always like a limit to how much I would diversify. That kind of like keeps together with like I mean, currently we are in a big crypto summer, right? Again, so like together with that, it kind of like naturally keeps me from like reducing the exposure to crypto a lot. But yeah, I do think it's still, even though like we could totally see another 90% crash or 94% crash that we just lived through in Ethereum, for example. I do think that crypto is similarly liquid than public stocks, but I do think that crypto has much more upside than public stocks. Like both are like very high, but I think crypto's potential is just much bigger than public stocks potential this decade.
Interesting. Jaan, thank you so much for your participation. I personally truly appreciate it, and thank you on behalf of Flashpoint and our founders and investors for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to hear from you, and would love to do more in the future. We have some other ideas which we will talk to you separately about. So thank you so much, and we truly admire your work.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.